All right, we are back. So, hello everyone. Denis Horrigan, a co-founder and partner at Connecticut Wealth Management, with Kevin Leahy, co-founder, president, CEO of Connecticut Wealth Management. And we've got a couple big wigs here. We are duly impressed and threatened by their size. We have Golics. We've got Mike Golic and Mike Golic Jr. I'm sure they look familiar. Their voices will be familiar to many people. They are athletes, professional college football players, as well as broadcasters on ESPN radio and television, and here to talk to us about the sports world and how everyone's handling it right now. So Mike, welcome to the world of Connecticut Wealth Management. Appreciate it.
No, appreciate you guys having us. Definitely. It's a strange time, but I got to say, communicating like this has become so normal that I don't know what we're all going to do when we're actually back in person together.
Well, this is the time for you to get any jokes out you want about us, because we can't do anything about it. The only problem is, at some point, quarantining will end.
Yeah.
We will square up on everything if anybody gets out of hand.
And our office is not that big. There's only so many places we can hide.
Not enough exits.
Right. Well, as I was saying before we hit record, I do have a helmet of hair products, so you can punch me in the head and it'll hurt your hand more than it will.
True.
All right, so guys, obviously you've been in the sports world your entire lives and careers, and obviously your profession is in the sports world, but at the heart of it, you're sports fans. And so just wondering, how are you guys handling the world without sports as sports fans?
Yeah, I think it's been tough from that aspect, and it's been interesting as some sports have started to trickle back, and we've seen ESPN right now has been broadcasting the Korea Baseball Organization, KBO Baseball, lead halfway across the world, that we're now broadcasting games for a lot of times during our show. And we found ourselves watching and way more invested, because you realize going through the first portion of quarantine, the part of sports that probably you miss the most is just not knowing what's going to happen. I can only watch so much Netflix. I can only watch so many Jordan documentaries before I come to the realization I know how all of this ends. And with sports, no matter what level it is and no matter what form the game is, it's at least something I'm not sure of. And I think that's the feeling as an athlete or as someone who covers that you miss the most.
Sports is the ultimate reality show. We have reality shows out there, but even those are pretty much scripted. Sports aren't, unless you talk to some conspiracy theorists. But for the most part, they're not. The weirdest part for me through all of this has been when I have it on ESPN or any other network and I see a sport, I'm like, wait a minute. And then it's realized it's from 1989 or 2003. It's like, I don't know what's live, real, taped anymore. That's been a hard part of it. So now that sports are starting to trickle back, it is nice to watch live sports. And I find myself watching things. I mean, hell, we're watching the cornhole championships and the dudes are wearing masks, but I don't give a damn. I'm watching. You know what? I'm watching live sports because I don't know the outcome.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw there's a great kitty cat goalie who soccer goalie.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic. If you haven't caught up on that, that's pretty impressive.
Pets doing quarantine sports has been a nice bonus.
The social media has really gone to I guess you could say, an interesting place or a dark place, depending on, because I don't think anybody expected it to all be this long. And man, it's. I think people are kind of chomping at the bit to move on.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, first off, guys, I thank you for doing this. We really sincerely appreciate it. And obviously you guys, I don't know what the numbers are. I know it's got to be millions of people listen and watch you guys every day. And it's not that we're without our fan base. So I don't know if you want to take the opportunity to say hi to some of our fans. Mrs. Horrigan, Dennis's mom, and Mrs. Leahy, my mom, are
Hey, listen, I know the feeling. I used to do a radio show from 4 to 6 in the morning, and every morning religiously, and this involves him because it involves my mom. She used to set an alarm, and I told her, we podcast this, you can find this later. She would set an alarm every morning, wake up to listen to the entire 2 hours of the show, and it would actually wake him up about 20 minutes sooner than his alarm would normally go off, all because she refused to not be there for every live minute of it. So there are no greater fans than our moms. That much I can say for pretty sure.
I think our moms say they watch it. I'm not sure that's actually true.
Listen, I know Chris did for Mike, because I'm sleeping in the same bed as her, and my alarm for the last 22 years has been set at 4:15. My alarm. When he did 4 to 6, her alarm was set for 4 o'clock. And let me tell you, 15 minutes of that time in the morning makes a difference. And I said, Chris, you can miss the first 15 minutes. He's like, no, I can't. I need to be there from minute 1. I'm like, all right, mother's love, I guess, because it sure is something a father's love.
Never stop being a mom. So guys, I'm back to, I guess, the seriousness, although we're talking about sports, but do you have any sense, again, being fans yourself, probably having your fingers on the pulse of this, when sports do come back, and you talked about they are in some other places, but when I guess the big ones come back, right, in the United States, do you have a sense? Do you think people are gonna be more obsessed, or are gonna maybe have found they can do without? Do you have any sense?
I would have to imagine it's going to be more so.
Yeah.
I think it's an instance where you're now finding all the different parts. ESPN ran this ad series called Dear Sports. Basically, it was, all of the announcers kind of getting an outlet to talk about the things about sports you missed. And as you had the time to stop and think about it and the time to focus on other things and do that, you realize what a pivotal role it plays for so many people, bringing families together, bringing communities together. And that's not even just sports at the professional level or the college level that we watch. It's youth sports, it's high school sports. We saw the devastation for so many high school seniors who had their spring seasons cut short as this got started. And so I think because of that, when you get it back, it's going to be, I think, even renewed fervor for all of it, because we're only going to get small parts of it at the beginning too. We're probably not going to have, be able to have fans in attendance when games start back up. And so I think every little bit we get, kind of like we've seen now, is going to be met with, every time we have a new sport that's come back, whether it's NASCAR or anything else, the numbers for the initial broadcasts have been huge because people are looking for anything.
I think the interest will be there. I think an interesting part of it's going to be where our two worlds may merge, in the fact that I do think people will want more of it, especially watching it. It'll be available to them. It was easy to find a channel and have sports. To be able to have that again. What will be interesting, and I think for the most part we'll start without fans, though there are some colleges like Ohio State who have recently come out and said they may be able to find a way to get 15, 20,000 people in a 100,000 seat stadium with social distancing and such. But for the most part, there'll be no fans. So I wonder, though, once fans can start going and maybe filling arenas up, a lot of people have not been making a lot of money. They haven't been working. That disposable income certainly isn't going to be what it was. So while I think they'll be happy they can turn it on TV, will they be as apt to go to all the games? I think they'll want to go to still get back to doing it, but will they be able to do it at the rate they were doing it before?
That's a great point. Sorry, Dennis. We've been talking about that a lot, right, with restaurants and retail, anything, right? Is the desire to want to go back and get out of the house, and maybe the initial flurry of all this is one thing, but to feel like, hey, I have enough discretionary income, rather, that I can continue to do these things that I once could do. Maybe they will, and maybe they won't.
Well, and I think, you guys point out one of the challenges of colleges is football is the driver, right? At least financially, football is a huge driver for the big college sports programs. And I wonder if they will be almost forced to come back to keep all the other sports alive. But I know you guys aren't doctors, at least as far as I know, but when do you guys think we will start to see people coming back to sports in significant numbers, where you're starting to see half full or more stadiums? Any sense of that?
Well, it's interesting. The CEO of the Miami Dolphins actually came up with a scenario, a plan to put. They have a 65,000 seat stadium at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, and a plan to put 15 to 20,000 people in it right out of the gate. He thought, with all the different gates that they use, how they would do temperatures going in and where they would sit. They had a whole plan, a coming in strategy and exit strategy. I don't know I think people would go, especially that amount. I mean, look what happened in Wisconsin when they opened up, the bars were full. I mean, people want to go, and I think they would get those numbers. So you could have those numbers when people will feel comfortable to fill a stadium again, shoulder to shoulder, fill a concert venue again, shoulder to shoulder. That may not be until we get a vaccine where people are that confident of being that close to anybody, because that's what we're talking about, right? Being that close, walking side by side with somebody, sitting next to somebody you don't know, sitting on a lawn at a concert next to somebody you don't know where they're packing 25,000 people in. So I think full might be vaccine-wise, but I think before that, keeping some social distancing rules, I could see them trying, because I think this is going to be, they're going to give an inch. You know, local governments are going to give an inch and people are going to take a mile. They're going to start to try and take more and more.
And I think there's some people that have made logical sense. David Tepper, who's the new owner of the Panthers, brought up this idea that we have people flying commercial airlines that are flying in much closer quarters than you're going to be sitting in an outdoor stadium right now if you're spaced properly, but they assume that risk. And a lot of times it's for things that maybe are comparatively more necessary than going to a sporting event. But I think what you're also seeing, too, is people like David Tepper, who is certainly someone who is an aggressive, younger owner comparatively and risk takers. People that are going to be ready and more prepared are going to be the ones leading the way on this. Big schools like Ohio State and Gene Smith, their athletic director, who plays a very prominent role in what goes on in college football, is already talking about this. Major universities like Nebraska are signing deals with tech companies that major in contactless payments. So a lot of the things that we've seen start to come to cash registers, but on an even broader scale where apps and those kind of things are going to take away the person-to-person interaction or the contact of payment in a stadium setting, which is really, I think, the thing that people are worried about in that. It's not just having a bunch of people come into the stadium, it's all of the interactions that are part of a game day process, and having to manage all of those small instances that we know are paramount when it comes to a disease that spreads the way this one does. I think you're going to see the haves are certainly going to be ready, and the have-nots, the programs that are operating with a lot less resources and a lot less than ways that can get prepared like that, are going to take a little longer to come along because of it.
And I think the other thing about colleges, they're good for the schools to put fans in the stadiums, but also the cities. How many times do you hear a small college town fills their stadium and that city now is 4 times its normal size? Those people are coming in, staying at hotels, eating at restaurants, buying gas, doing all the things to help, build up that city. We went to school at one place at Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. I mean, they live for football season, the city of South Bend and the surrounding cities. So that's a damning thing for some of those cities around those football towns.
Have you guys ever, I guess a little bit of the question is, I guess, well, have you guys ever played in an empty stadium? You guys played a lot of different levels of football all the way up to the top level.
I think I'm the only one in this duo that can claim to that. So
outside of practice.
Yeah, I can say outside of practice, which is just its own animal, certainly. But I played in a fall experimental league one year when I was making the rounds, getting cut in NFL training camps, going and trying out in the CFL and doing stuff. I ended up in a fall experimental league, and I played for a team that was based in Brooklyn. And I'll never forget, we played a game at Harvard Stadium on their campus against the team from Boston that was in that league. And we had 5 people in the stands. One of them was my mom, and one was so drunk they threw him out. So they essentially threw out 20% of our fan base because he was so drunk in that.
That's unreal.
But I always say this because people talk about from the athlete's perspective playing in an empty stadium, and how can you play without the atmosphere surrounding game day? And I always said easier than you think. It's not great and it's a lot less fun to do so, but once you get out there, you got to think whether it's NASCAR that's back now, whether it's football or anything else, there's a physical toll in all these sports. There's the idea of self-preservation. And so I have to worry about the 300-pound guys across from me that want to hurt me and my friends on the football field. I don't have time to necessarily worry about if people are getting loud enough on third down. So I think it's like anything else. A lot of problems once you get in between the lines become mitigated even like that.
Fans are ancillary to the athlete once they start doing what they're supposed to do. You have to have so much concentration that you can't let that affect you. So I think it's odd when you first see it pregame and all that. You know, we've had more than a few NASCAR drivers on talking about how different it is. You can't work with your team. You can't be in the garage. You're by yourself going from your mobile home right to the car. But listen, once that flag goes down, I mean, you're driving at a high rate of speed right next to somebody. You can't worry about, it's not like they're looking in the stands anyway. You know, I got to worry about a beefy old lineman. I can't say what's the dude in the third row doing over there. So you can't really worry too much about that.
And I guess actually now that we're talking about it, I'm thinking of being a little bit of a college basketball fan. I'm thinking of, you know, the early round March Madness games that are off in some region, right? The number one plays a 16 in wherever it might be, and there's maybe 10% of the fans, and it's at 10 o'clock at night. Or a Thanksgiving tournament, you know, the battle at Atlantis or whatever, and there's nobody there, and those guys still are playing basketball at a pretty high level.
They are.
Mater.
There's no rush. There's no substitute for the rush of the crowd either. Like I was also fortunate to play in a national championship game. Like I'll never forget the feeling of knowing all the eyes of the world on you and the flash bulbs that kick off and all that stuff. Like it certainly elevates all of your senses because you understand in that moment, but it's an adjustment that I think these are also high-level athletes we're talking about, so I think it's an adjustment they can make.
By the way, there's never a conversation that Mike and I can have where he won't find a way to get in the fact that he played it. My best record at Notre Dame was 7-4. So, you know what? Thanks for giving him just the slightest opening to go ahead and slam me in the head again with that.
We had some, for the record, we had some jokes about Notre Dame. You know, what was it like to play at that West Haven High School stadium, you know, against the likes of Xavier and other football powerhouses, and we decided to stay away from it.
Listen, you can joke about Notre Dame all you want. As I said earlier, just remember quarantine ends at some point. So
I'm never going back to the office.
Work from home forever.
So maybe perhaps the last question. You guys are on the radio every single day. You have been this whole time. What has surprised you about how America and perhaps the world has handled a world without sports? Anything stick out that other than, as you pointed out before, Mike, the unbelievable numbers that The Last Dance has done, but anything else really surprised you about how people are handling it?
I think no, because listen, we've had other tragedies, we know. And the one thing that's always been amazing is how people rally. So there were no sports, but yet we're on air every day. Luckily, we had content about what was going on and how it involved sports. But there were also so many stories, you know, so many people did different things about honoring people. We did something as well, calling it our hometown hero, you know, which could be someone working the front lines in a hospital or somebody restacking the shelves in a grocery store. They're all putting themselves, you know, at risk. And it was amazing to hear these regular, quote unquote, regular people talk, you know, about they never had a thought other than to help, you know, and it was very cool. And it just, you know, unfortunately we were all around and went through the, you know, 911 and the aftermath of that. And you just see when tragedy hits, how people, man, some people just naturally run right to the front lines and are going to help. And I think that was one of the coolest things we got to do. It took us about a total of 4 or 5 weeks to go to get them all. And then we would talk to the people, and it never ceases to amaze me of the people and how they respond to things. And, you know, we had our fun along the way talking about sports and things like that, but that never ceases, again, to amaze me at how people will step up in tough situations.
Humbling.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think people have, you know, really taken to almost over communicating too, because they know people need it right now. We don't have those usual rallying points that sports are. And you've seen part of that come from the athletes who are out of, you know, they're out of their routine. They're creatures of habit like so many of us. And so they've been reaching out more. They've been doing more and certainly finding ways to give back, but checking on each other, being more involved in the public conversation. And I think you see that, you know, just around neighborhoods. I walk around here and see people having, you know, social distance get-togethers, checking on one another, being outside and doing things. And so I think certainly just in my own little bubble around here, it's been nice to see people respond by trying even more, by going out and trying to do what they can, even more. And in the ultimate like sports metaphor for life, controlling what you can control. It's like the day one thing that you make sure to remind yourself of in any sort of athletic forum, because there's so much out of your control. And we all had that, Rob, during this. And so I think you've seen people try and manage what they can as best they can, and you see little examples of it every day.
And there's still the other side of it then of the humorous side of it, because when this all started, we didn't know how long we were all going to be quarantined. So I know there were people, and he was one of them, and I certainly was, that are going to like, okay, I'm going to make sure I eat right, and I'm going to come out of this quarantine better. By day, 40 or whatever, dude here is eating a pint of ice cream a day. I mean, you go by outside and you see in people's recycles wine bottles, beer bottles, booze bottles. I mean, so at what point in quarantine did people just say, I'm throwing in the towel, I'm done, I'm giving in, I mean, there's some incredible stories. And I've learned so much about what the hell Zoom is and blue jeans are and all this technical stuff that I never know and never wanted to know going on right now.
People also have been baking a lot of bread, which I
Yes,
don't understand.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
been a weird
What is that?
My friends all decided to bake bread all of a sudden. I have not gone down that road.
I made pizza crust for the first time in my life. Who knew?
Wow, there you go.
Well, before this devolves into absurdity that wastes even more of your time, guys. Seriously, this is a treat for us, and again, both of our fans will really like to see this. So seriously, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Great visit.
Our pleasure. And from the one side, I know from our sports side is it's going to be back. Hopefully it'll be better than ever at some point. And from your guys' side, the money side, one thing I've learned through this, I'm not even looking at the stock market for a long, long time.
Appreciate that. Very cool, by the way. One of the cool things about that I think that has kind of come out of this is there's something that's a little bit more intimate about these Zoom meetings. Like we got to hear Kevin's dog barking. We get to see you guys. We never see you two guys actually together. We see one of you or we see the other one of you, but right now we get to see both of you with the dome in between the both of you, too, behind you, right over the shoulder. Yeah. So it's very cool.
I mean, seriously.
Come on, we are pros.
We are
do this.
professionals.
Setting up live shots has been my life for like 8 weeks now. So if you think this was an accident, you know what? I appreciate it. I'm that good.
Wait a minute. Let's do it this way. Wait.
Wait.
We didn't even know. Oh, wow. The luck of the Irish, huh?
She's never far away.
Wow.
So are you saying you thought about whether or not a dog might bark in advance of doing an interview online? Huh.
I don't know who else would have considered such a thing.
Such professionals.
All right. Guys, thank you so much. It's great to see you. We'll see you. You guys look good. Stay healthy.
Thank you. Do the same. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. See ya.